Have you ever stopped to think that maybe what is preventing your miracles from happening is not a lack of faith, but the wrong words you have been saying in prayer? What if I told you that Jesus revealed exactly what these 3 words are, and that using them can silence heaven over your life? In today's video, you will learn the amazing story of Catherine Blake, a nurse from the United States who died for 11 minutes and had a direct encounter with Jesus. He took her to a spiritual dimension where he revealed a truth that is transforming the way thousands of people pray. Get ready, because this revelation can change your life. Like it right now. Subscribe to the channel if you love this type of impactful content. And write here in the comments which city you are watching from. I really want to know how far this message will reach. My name is Catherine Blake. I am 39 years old and live in Charleston, South Carolina. I have been a nurse for almost 2 decades and have always been known for being a person of faith. Prayers at my bedside, verses on my lab coat, smiles even in the midst of pain. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I experienced on a typical night of shift. Nothing could prepare me for dying and hearing from Jesus himself that my prayers were being nullified by 3 forbidden words. 3 words that, according to him, silenced the sky. It all started on October 17th, 2024. It was 1 a.m. I was in the hospital, tired, standing for more than 14 hours, when an intense pain shot through my chest. I thought it was anxiety, but it wasn't. It was a massive heart attack. I collapsed right there amidst cold hallways and alarms ringing. Colleagues rushed over. A code blue echoed through the speakers. And then, silence. I was declared clinically dead for 11 minutes. But in that interval between the last beat of my heart and the first charge of the defibrillator, my soul was pulled out of my body with a force so sudden it was like a whirlwind of light. I felt time stop, space disappear, my body, non-existent, fear, dissolved. I was taken, or rather, sucked, through a tunnel made of liquid light. And at the end of it, what I saw took away any trace of doubt. Jesus was there, not like a static church image, but alive, vibrant, immense in glory. His eyes had the power to strip the soul bare, and what he said to me changed everything I thought I knew about prayer, faith, and heaven itself. "You died with the wrong words in your mouth, Catherine," he said, his voice shaking the foundations of reality. I tried to understand. I was shaking. I was crying. I stammered something like, "Lord, if it is your will, give me one more chance. Maybe I can still..." And he interrupted me with an authority that cannot be learned from books. "Don't say that." At that moment, Jesus revealed to me what he called the 3 words that prevent the miracle, the words that, according to him, make heaven silent. And the first one, I had just said it. The atmosphere around him was so intense, so alive, that any wrong thought seemed to be shattered before it could be uttered. Jesus stepped forward, his eyes, deeper than the sea, steadier than mountains, fixed mine, and then, with a firmness that made my soul tremble, he repeated, "Don't say that word again, Catherine. If does not belong in a child's prayer." At that moment, everything went silent. It was no ordinary silence. It was an eternal silence, woe, as if the universe held its breath. Then Jesus raised his hand and, with a simple gesture, as if parting an invisible curtain, showed me a vision of the spiritual world. I saw prayers, millions of them, rising from the earth like little flames, some strong, some weak, some dying out halfway, and the prayers that said, "Lord, with if it is your will," these would vanish like smoke before reaching anywhere. "You see, Catherine," he said, "every time you pray using if, you put on the armor of doubt and hand over the sword to the enemy. You think you are being humble, but you are weakening your own spiritual authority." He showed me scenes from my life. How many times I prayed with good intentions but with words filled with fear. "Lord," with "can." "Listen to me." "God," with "you still love me." "Father," with "I deserve it." And in each scene, my faith withered before it was even expressed. "You are my daughter," Jesus said, his tone a mix of sadness and compassion. "You don't pray to try to convince me of something. You pray to align your heart with mine. When I said, whatever you ask in my name, I will do it," I didn't put an if in the middle. It's fear that adds the if, not faith. And then, as if sealing an eternal truth, he declared, "Never pray again saying if. Pray saying, I receive healing. I receive peace. I receive deliverance. Because when you declare what is already yours through the cross, heaven responds with power. That's when I realized. For years, I had been praying like someone begging for alms outside the palace, when in fact I was an heiress. For years, the if had sabotaged my faith. That, he concluded, is the first word that should never come out of your mouth in prayer. It cancels the miracle before it begins. And then he took a deep breath and prepared me for the next revelation. After revealing the danger hidden in the word with, Jesus walked with me through a kind of valley made of spiritual echoes. It was like being inside an immense chamber where human voices resounded. Thousands of them. I heard people praying, pleading, crying, but many of these prayers had no power. They were like lost, fragile sighs, dissipating in the air. He stopped, looked into my eyes and said seriously, "Now I want you to listen carefully to the second word that silences the sky. Maybe." At that very moment, the words echoed through the walls of that valley like muffled thunder. Maybe God will hear me. Maybe I deserve this. Maybe God wants to heal me. I heard these phrases being spoken by unfamiliar faces, distant voices, and among them, I recognized my own. I felt a chill run through every inch of my being. Do you understand what happens when a child of mine says, "Maybe"? Jesus asked. It's as if he's describing me as an indecisive, weak, unstable father, as if I'm someone who needs to be convinced to do good, and that contradicts everything I am. He took me to a shocking scene. A small, hungry girl reaching out to her father and saying, "Maybe you'll give me some food today." The father was crying there, and Jesus explained to me, "That's how I feel when you pray like that. I died on that cross to guarantee the answer, but you keep acting like you need to beg for attention." Tears streamed down my face without me being able to stop them. It was as if every time I prayed with perhaps had taken away a piece of the confidence he wanted me to have. And what's more, each perhaps mine gave space for the enemy to act. It was a password that said to hell, "She doesn't know what she's asking for, so we can interfere." Jesus then said something that marked my spirit. "Catherine, faith begins where a maybe on ends. Doubt is the smoke that keeps the light from shining. The enemy doesn't need to silence your prayers if he can just fill them with perhaps, because that way, they will never reach the throne." I saw that fog again. The prayers with perhaps they got lost before they could go up. They were like bubbles bursting in the air, without direction, without destination. In Hebrews 11:6, Jesus reminded me, "It is written that without faith it is impossible to please God." And faith does not say perhaps. Faith says, "I know whom I have believed." Faith says, "It's already mine because he promised it." Then he touched my shoulder and said, "This is the second word that should never be in a prayer. Erase it from your spiritual vocabulary, because it hides unbelief disguised as humility." I was shaking. 2 words, 2 poisons, and a clarity I had never felt in my life. "Now, Catherine," Jesus said, "there is only one left." After the revelation about the ifs and the maybes, I felt as if I had already been given a new soul, as if my mind had been washed clean with truth. But Jesus said there was more, and what he revealed next was, without a doubt, the deepest blow to my heart. Standing before me with an expression that mixed pain and compassion, he spoke slowly, with a firmness that cut to the soul. "The third word that should never come out of your mouth in prayer is unworthy." At that moment, everything around me went dark, as if that single word carried an ancient weight, and I knew it all too well. How many times had I prayed saying, "Lord, I am unworthy to ask this," or "Father, I know I don't deserve it." Jesus approached me, looked into my eyes, and with a choked voice, said, "Catherine, every time you call yourself unworthy, you are agreeing with the accuser." I felt my legs give out. I had always thought that saying, "I am unworthy," was humility. I had always heard that it was a sign of reverence. But Jesus showed me a scene that turned my soul inside out, a kind of heavenly court. I saw the devil standing before the throne of God, accusing me in a cruel voice. "She is not worthy. She is not clean. She has no right." And then, I found myself kneeling, repeating, "I am unworthy." Jesus looked at me and said with visible pain, "Don't you realize that by saying this you are repeating exactly what the accuser says? You are reinforcing the lie instead of stating the truth." He then opened his hands. On them were marked the scars of the cross. With tears in his eyes, he said, "When I cried out, 'It is finished,' it was for you. When my blood fell on the ground, It fell to make you worthy. You do not enter the Father's presence by merit, but by my sacrifice. To refuse this is like spitting on the cross with smooth words. My tears flowed. I never imagined that my false humility was, in fact, an affront to the sacrifice of the Son of God. Jesus then said something that set fire to my soul. True humility recognizes that you were once unworthy, but have now been made worthy in me. You do not pray as a desperate sinner. You pray as a redeemed daughter. And he completed. Romans 8:1 says, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. But many continue to condemn themselves, with the word that brings the greatest joy to hell, unworthy." I saw that picture of the spiritual world again, a war in heaven. And every time a child of God prayed in faith, lights exploded. But when he prayed saying, "I am unworthy," the light went out, and the demons gained territory. Jesus looked at me tenderly and said, "Never pray like that again. Say, and I am loved, I am washed, I am an heir, not by me, but by him." 3 words, 3 poisons, 3 hidden truths, and the sky at last began to open. After the revelation of the 3 forbidden words, with perhaps and unworthy, Jesus took me to another level of understanding. He reached out his hand and with a simple touch, opened before me an overwhelming vision, the spiritual battlefield of prayers. I saw it as a living map of the spiritual world. Earth below, heaven above, between them, a layer of war, light versus darkness, angels versus dark forces. But what shocked me most was to see what Jesus called spiritual access lines. They were like tunnels of light that connected the prayers to the throne of God. However, there was something that froze me inside. Not all the prayers got through. "See, Catherine," Jesus said, pointing to a prayer that was rising like a fiery arrow. "This is the prayer of one who has understood who he is in me. It is like fire in the spirit world. It goes through everything." And then he showed me another, a prayer wrapped in gray, wavering smoke that trembled and wavered and went out before it went up. It was the prayer of someone who had said, "Lord, if you can, perhaps you will hear me. I am unworthy." Those words created a dense fog, and there was the naked truth. It's not that God doesn't hear, it's that these words prevent prayer from coming through with strength and authority. Jesus explained it to me with a clarity that pierced me like a sword. Words are spiritual keys. They open or close doors. Every "if" is a lock. Every "maybe" is a delay. Every "unworthy" is a light extinguisher. But every "I receive," every "I believe," every "I am loved" are explosions of faith in the spiritual world. I saw angels standing by. They were waiting for the right prayers. When someone prayed with faith, with confidence, they moved like lightning, bringing answers, healings, deliverances. But when the prayer was weak, embarrassed, full of doubt, the angels retreated, helpless. "Do you understand now, Catherine?" Jesus asked. "Why have I brought you here? Why have I revealed these 3 forbidden words to you?" And before I could answer, he finished with a sentence that set my spirit on fire. "Because millions of my children are praying like spiritual beggars, and heaven remains silent not for lack of love, but for lack of true faith." Jesus then looked me in the eyes with divine firmness and said, "You will come back. You will tell the world that the secret to powerful prayer is not in volume or emotion or pretty words. It is in unshakable trust in my love, in knowing who you are in me." I was in tears. The spiritual warfare that occurs every time we open our mouths to pray was more real than anything I have ever experienced. And then Jesus turned around. A new scene was about to unfold. The environment around us began to change. The spiritual warfare Jesus had shown me disappeared in a whirlwind of light, and in its place was something so glorious that words can barely describe it. The throne of grace. It was like standing before the very center of the universe, an immense throne surrounded by rivers of living light, colors that do not exist on earth, and music that did not come from instruments but seemed to emanate from the very essence of God. And yet I saw something that broke my heart. Crowds of people kneeling outside, all with faces lowered, eyes full of shame and fear. "Who are these people?" I asked. Jesus responded with gentle sadness, "They are my children, but they do not believe they can enter. They have been taught to pray as servants, not as children, to stand outside the throne, begging, when I have already torn the veil so that they may enter boldly." I saw a man praying in tears. "Lord, if you can, have mercy on me." A woman repeated, "Perhaps the Lord will hear me, though I am so unworthy." And every time they said these words, an invisible barrier formed between them and the throne. Jesus then pointed to the entrance, where there was a bright light. A few people walked through, their eyes shining with faith, saying, "Father, I come in the name of Jesus. I receive your promise. Thank you for making me worthy." And these were received with celebration. It was as if the entire sky vibrated with each prayer made with confidence. "Daughter," Jesus said, Hebrews 4:16 says, "Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with boldness." But many have interpreted boldness as arrogance, when in fact, it is faith dressed in spiritual identity. I felt like my heart was being reprogrammed at that moment. The shame, the fear, the feeling of being too small before God, all of it was spiritual lie disguised as humility. Jesus then said something that seemed to pulse inside me. The greatest mistake many Christians make is not praying too little. It is praying badly. They pray as if they still need to earn the love that has already been given. They pray as if the throne were locked, but the throne is open. The veil has been torn. They only need to enter. With that, he extended his hand to me and said, "Now come with me, Catherine. I want to show you what happens when a child prays with real faith." And in that moment, I was pulled into another scenario, one where prayers were creating miracles before my eyes. Jesus held my hand firmly and led me into what seemed like a completely new dimensional plane. It was like watching time unfold before me, as if I were inside a sequence of real, invisible events happening simultaneously with our physical world. And there, he showed me what happens when a prayer made with true faith comes from the mouth of a child of God. I saw a simple woman sitting alone in her living room, praying in tears. But it was not a hesitant prayer. She said, "Father, I receive the healing that Jesus achieved for me. I am a daughter, and I know that you hear my voice." And at that exact moment, the spiritual atmosphere around her exploded into light. Angels moved like sparks of power. Doors began to open in various regions. Healings manifested. And the most unbelievable, demons who were trying to create spiritual barriers retreated immediately, as if they had been struck by a direct order from heaven itself. Jesus looked at me and said with intensity, "This is how the invisible moves. When you pray as a daughter, hell is silent and heaven acts." Then he showed me another scene, a person in a church, on his knees, saying, "Lord, if it is still your will, perhaps I deserve it." And there was no movement. The angels watched, but could not act. It was as if an invisible fence surrounded that prayer, suffocating its strength. Jesus pointed and declared, "See the difference. A prayer with faith and identity is a decree in the spiritual world, but a prayer with doubt is just a whisper in the void." It was at that moment that something incredible happened. I saw a boy of only 8 years old, lying in bed praying simply, "Jesus, thank you that you have already healed me. I know that I am yours." And when he said this, the room was filled with glory. A light descended like a silent ray and touched his chest. A respiratory condition disappeared instantly. "This is what I want you to understand, Catherine," Jesus said tenderly. "Power is not in pretty words. It is in pure faith, without the spiritual poisons you have learned to avoid." With each scene, my spirit was set on fire. I saw the supernatural happening so clearly that I asked myself, why have we never been taught this way? Why have we become accustomed to praying with fear, uncertainty, and shame? Jesus then declared, "My people cry out for miracles, but they doubt their position. They ask for healings, but they reject the identity of those who have been healed." The enemy does not need to prevent the miracle. He only needs to convince the person that he cannot receive it. And at that point, he began to prepare me for the final revelation, the key that turns every ordinary prayer into a powerful spiritual weapon. Jesus took me to a place that seemed to be the heart of spiritual reality. There was no defined shape, no ground, no sky. It was like being inside a living pulse, as if the universe had an emotional center, and he was there, teaching me the essence of it all. Prayer is vocalized identity. "Do you want to know why so many miracles are postponed?" he asked me. I just nodded, feeling my chest burn with the approaching truth. Because many of my children pray like spiritual orphans. They beg for attention. They ask as if they don't know if they will be heard, and they talk to me as if I were distant or irritated. and with a subtle wave of his hand, he showed me scenes, thousands of people saying phrases like, "Lord, please look at me. I know I don't deserve it, if you want." These prayers were like muffled murmurs, lost in the dark. "Now watch when a son understands who he is," Jesus said, opening another vision. I saw a woman praying standing up, eyes open, heart firm. "Father, I come to your throne with boldness, not by my own merits, but by the blood of the Lamb. I receive healing, peace, and direction. I am your daughter, and heaven hears me." The spiritual response was immediate. It was like a thunder of glory. The atmosphere changed. The impossible bowed before certainty. "Do you understand now?" Jesus said, his voice almost a whisper, but capable of shaking infinity. Prayer does not begin in the mouth. It begins in the identity. If you pray as a victim, you attract pity. If you pray as a daughter, you attract miracles. And then he went further. Powerful prayer is not aggressive. It is safe. You don't need to shout to have authority. You just need to believe in what has already been achieved. At that moment, I saw multitudes rising up in spirit. Their mouths declared in faith, "I am a daughter of the King. I am justified. I am heard. I take possession of what is mine." And I saw the sky responding with an unstoppable force, like an army on the march. Jesus then came close to me, held my face and said, "Tell my people, stop praying like a beggar. Start praying like an heir. I did not die to give you a faint hope, but an eternal certainty. The throne is open. The veil is torn, and your voice carries weight in heaven." I cried. His every word seemed to restore something in me that had been broken for years, as if I was finally praying with my whole soul. And then he whispered, "Now, Catherine, there's something else I need to show you." Jesus now led me down a narrow path lined with mirrors, but these mirrors did not reflect my outward image. They reflected the beliefs I held about myself, and with each step I took, words appeared on the glass. Sinner, weak, despised, unworthy. My heart sank. I recognized each one. "These are the names you have accepted, Catherine," Jesus said softly, but with pain in his voice. "Not because I gave them to you, but because you have taken them from the world, from religion, from hurts and fears." With a gesture, he snapped his fingers, and the mirrors shattered into 1,000 pieces. The most dangerous lie that hell has sown was not to say that God does not exist. It was to convince my children that they are unloved, unworthy, and unheard. This lie wears the mask of humility, but it is pure poison, and it has silenced an entire generation of prayers. Those words tore me apart inside, because I knew I had prayed my whole life with that wounded voice. I never imagined that I was actually feeding the exact kind of thoughts the enemy wanted me to have. "Have you ever seen anyone try to hide from me with prayer?" Jesus asked. And before I could answer, I saw entire scenes, crowded churches, people in tears, but praying with rehearsed, memorized, distant words, all to try to appear reverent, when in reality they were hiding from a God who only wanted to hear them as they really were. "Reverence is not fear," he said. "Reverence is love conscious of greatness. But love, true love, does not shrink back. Love draws near." Jesus showed me what he calls true prayer, the one that comes from the bottom of the heart, without filters, without masks, without spiritual poison. He said, "The most powerful prayer in the world can be a whispered phrase, if it is spoken with faith, identity, and love." And then, with eyes filled with compassion, he concluded, "Tell my people to stop praying with voices that are not their own, to stop repeating what they have heard from the fearful and the religious, to begin to pray with the boldness of those who know that heaven is not closed. It is wide open." I felt an urgency within me, not only to live this, but to tell it, to shout to the world that we are praying wrong, that we have been deceived by beautiful words that hide deep lies, that we have not been called to the prayer of fear, but to the prayer of fire. And Jesus said, "Now, Catherine, it is time to return." But first, he would give me one last instruction. Jesus took me to what seemed like the same starting point, the threshold between heaven and earth. I felt like I was about to go back, but there was something different inside me, a new fire, a whole identity, a faith that no longer wavered. He stopped in front of me and, with a calm smile and eyes shining as only eternity could contain, he said, "Catherine, take this message to my people. Tell them that prayer was never a fearful request. It was always a conversation between father and child, but many have forgotten that. He paused and continued, "Pray as one who knows that the veil has been torn, because it has." At that very moment, behind Jesus, I saw the scene of the crucifixion, the exact moment when the veil of the temple was torn from top to bottom. But this time, I didn't just see the temple. I saw millions of hearts being opened at the same time. It was as if that veil had been a wall between each child and the Father, and now, nothing separated them anymore. "Never again pray as if I were far away," Jesus said. "Never again pray as if you don't know if you will be heard. Never again pray as if you need to beg for the love that was already given on the cross." Then he said to me with the firmness of someone delivering a decree, "When you return, teach them to pray with authority, with faith, with gratitude. Tell them to eliminate the ifs, the maybes, and the unworthy from their prayers. Teach them to say, 'I receive, I believe, I am loved,' because that is what moves heaven." Jesus extended his pierced hands to me once more, and I felt as if the light of the entire universe passed through me. "You have been called to remind my bride that she is not a spiritual beggar. She is an heir, she is a priestess, she is mine." And in an instant, the scene changed. I heard the sound of heart monitors, voices running around me, the white light of the hospital. I was back. 11 minutes without a heartbeat. 11 minutes in the arms of Jesus. But when I opened my eyes, I was no longer the same Catherine Blake. I had died, to be reborn as a daughter. And if you're listening to this right now, it's because this message is not just for me. It's for you. Pray as one who has been made worthy. Pray like someone who has access. Pray like someone who has already won. Because the moment you change the way you pray, everything starts to change. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time,